Most investment bankers don't quit too early, they quit too late. Even though you can make $300,000 per year as a first-year associate, the path ahead looks less like freedom and more like a trap. If you stay too long, you don't just burn out, you lock yourself into a career that quietly shrinks your options. Let's start with the obvious question. If banking is such a grind, why does everyone still want to do it? It's gotta be the money, right? You're 24, pulling in $150,000 straight out of undergrad. Your friends are making $60K at some consulting firm or tech startup, and you're out here making more than your parents did when they were 40. It feels like you made it. But here's what most people don't realize. That huge salary, it's not because the job itself is high leverage or high impact. Banks aren't paying you because you're adding crazy value. They're paying you because they want to keep Harvard and Wharton and Stanford happy. Think about it. These top schools charge $200,000 for an MBA. They need to be able to tell their prospective students, hey, if you come here, you can land a $300K job right out of school. That's the pitch. And banks play along because they want to find first access to the smartest people. So they offer these massive starting salaries, not because you deserve it yet, but because it keeps the pipeline flowing. And here's the thing, they're not dumb about it. Banks structure compensation to make you feel lucky. You get a huge bonus your first year and you're 25 with more money than you've ever seen in your entire life. So you start upgrading your life and get a better apartment, nicer dinners, maybe you buy a car, and that comfort then becomes a cage. Because what you don't see is that most of that money is just compensating you for the brutal hours. It's not building your future, it's paying you to stay. So when you're 28 and making $300K, sounds great, right? But you're living in a one bedroom that you never see, you're eating seamless at your desk at 11 p.m. and you haven't seen your friends in weeks. The money isn't freedom, it's just really expensive handcuffs. The longer that you stay, the more that you start to compare yourself to other bankers instead of looking at other options beyond the industry. Okay, so the money's great, but it's kind of a trap, but at least you're getting paid like a top performer, right? Wrong. Let me tell you what's actually happening inside the bank. You're staffed on 3 deals. Each one has a different VP, and all 3 of them expect 100% of your time. You're working 90-hour weeks, cranking out pitch books, building models. But here's the dirty secret. Banks don't scale with technology or capital. They scale with your hours. You are a fixed cost that delivers output. What does that mean? It means that whether you're working 40 hours this week or 100 hours, you're paid the same. Your salary doesn't change. Your bonus might go up a little bit, but it's not tied to the number of hours you put in. So from the bank's perspective, you're basically a machine. And the more that they can squeeze out of you, the better their margins are gonna be. And as long as you're billable for service, there's no incentive to develop you. They don't care if you're learning, they just care if you're producing. You're expected to think like an owner, but you're not one. You have 0 equity, you don't share in the upside, you're just the engine that keeps the machine running. That's why when you deliver flawlessly, the reward is more work. You crush a deal? Great. Here's 3 more for you. You're not being groomed for leadership, you're being optimized for output. And honestly, that's fine if you know it going in. The problem is that most people don't. They think that they're on some trajectory and think that if they just work hard enough, then they're gonna break through. But the truth is that you're capped, and the cap isn't as high as you might have thought. So if banks are just using you as a fixed cost, why do people put up with it? And it's because the skills are real. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that banking is worthless, because it is absolutely not. You learn things in banking that you just can't learn anywhere else. You know how to build a full LBO model in 3 hours. You can prep a pitch book overnight. You can walk a CFO through debt covenants without breaking a sweat. And those are legitimately elite skills. Banking forces you to work under pressure in small teams, and you learn how to communicate complex ideas clearly. You're basically getting paid a lot of money to go through a boot camp that other people would pay 6 figures for. But here's the problem. The longer that you stay, the more those skills narrow. And you become a specialist in a very specific environment, and that makes it harder to transition. Think about it. You're a third-year associate. You've been grinding in M&A for 3 years, and then you try to jump to a startup. And then all of a sudden you realize that you've never worked with engineers, you can't write a job spec, and you have no idea how marketing budgets work. All you know is how to build models and make decks. And that's valuable, don't get me wrong, but it's not as transferable as you think. The financial modeling, the sales, the execution, all of that is world-class, but only if you use it to exit into something higher leverage. If you stay too long, those skills end up becoming less like a toolkit and more like a prison. All right, let's talk about the real reason most people enter banking in the first place. And it's not the salary, it's the exits. Private equity, hedge funds, venture capital, those are their dream jobs, right? That's where the real money is to be made. And here's the thing, those exits are real, but they don't last forever. A second-year analyst gets private equity interviews every week. Recruiters are blowing up their phones, and they're getting flown out to New York for fancy dinners. But a fifth-year associate is getting ghosted. Why? Because private equity and hedge funds recruit almost exclusively from junior bankers. They want people who are sharp, coachable, and hungry. And they assume that after a few years, you've hardened into banking culture. They think that you've learned all the bad habits, you've gotten comfortable, and you're just not as moldable. And honestly, they're not wrong. Every extra year that you stay, your skill set becomes more specific to investment banking. You start getting seen as not quite a fit for other roles, and even lateral moves get harder. I've seen this happen so many times. Someone wants to jump to corporate development at a tech company, so they start applying, and that's when they realize that they already missed their window. Now they're cold emailing corporate strategy teams, trying to find a way out, and nobody's responding. Because once you're past year 3 or 4, people start wondering, hey, why are they still in investment banking? Are they just not good enough to leave? And it's brutal, but it's real. The exit doors are wide open early, but they close really fast. Okay, so let's say that you stay. You grind it out, you make VP, maybe even director, and you're making $400,000, $500,000, maybe even more if you're crushing it. Like, that's great money, right? Sure, but you're still capped. Let me tell you where real wealth comes from. Your classmate from business school joins a startup, takes a pay cut to $120,000. You're making $300K at the time, so you think that they're crazy. But 5 years later, their equity is worth $4 million, and you're still making $400K, and your net worth is maybe $500K if you saved really well. So what happened? Equity. Wealth doesn't come from salary, it comes from ownership. And that's what equity gives you, a stake in the upside, and equity compounds over time. So in banking, your best case scenario is a slightly higher bonus, but there's no compounding, there's no exponential curve up. It's just a hamster wheel with nicer wheels. You work 100-hour weeks, crush deals, make your bosses rich. But at the end of the day, all of that value goes to the bank, not to you. If you want upside, you need leverage. You need to own a part of the thing that you're building. And so there's two ways to do that. That means investing or starting something. It does not mean staying capped in a salary band. Look, I'm not saying that everyone needs to start a company. That's not realistic. But you need to think about where your hours are going. In banking, every hour you work makes the bank richer. Doesn't build your equity, it doesn't scale. In private equity, you get carried interest, and that's real equity that scales. In a startup, you own shares. If it works, you're set for life. But in banking, you're just trading time for money. And time is the one thing that you can't get back. Here's something that people don't talk about enough. Banking used to be rare. 30 years ago, if you made it into M&A at a bulge bracket, you were part of an elite club. There just weren't that many people who could do it. That meant that you had leverage, you were valuable, and you were really hard to replace. But now it's different. Now it's oversaturated. And even after you go through the work to crush your interviews, get the offer, make your parents proud of you so that they're bragging to all their friends, but at the same time, there's 20 other people just like you who are starting the exact same job. Literally every top MBA, every high-performing undergrad, every LinkedIn tryhard is all gunning for the same job. M&A used to be niche. Now it's just a pipeline. And that means that when you burn out, there's a line of people that are ready to take your place. And the bank doesn't miss a beat at all. They'll just swap you out. So if you feel like you need to leave for a 2-week mental health break, you might come back and there's a new hire that's doing your job. And that's just the reality. You're not irreplaceable. You're part of a system. And that system doesn't care about you. I'm not saying that to be harsh. I'm saying that so that you actually understand the game. Banks have figured out how to manufacture talent. They recruit from the same schools, they run the same training programs, and they churn out the same skill set. You're not special to them. You're just the current person in the seat. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for the bank to take care of you, and you start taking care of yourself. So if banking isn't a forever job, how should you approach it? Here's my take. You're 2 years in, you've learned to excel cold. You've led client calls, you feel like your confidence is skyrocketing. That's the signal. The goal isn't to coast, it's to extract as much value as possible. I want you to use banking like a boot camp. Build up your skills, earn some credibility, understand how money moves, but then you need to know when it's time to pivot. Don't wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder and tell you it's time to move on, because they're not going to do that. They will keep you there as long as you let them. So you need to have a plan. Start exploring your exits early. Build up some relationships outside of the bank. Talk to people in private equity, talk to people in venture capital, talk to founders at startups. Spend some time to figure out what you actually want to build. Because once those golden handcuffs tighten, it just gets way harder to leave. You start justifying it. I'll just stay one more year for the bonus, or I'll just make vice president and then I'll leave. But before you know it, you'll be 35 and still in banking, still saying that you're gonna leave. But anyone who does that never does. And look, I get it. Leaving is scary. You're walking away from a stable paycheck and a prestigious title, and you're walking away from the path that everyone told you was safe. But safe isn't the same as right. And if your goal is to actually build wealth, if you want to have optionality and have your own time, you can't stay forever. You need to see banking as a tool and not the destination. So I would recommend that you use your time there to develop some rare skills, meet some high performers, learn the game, but then make sure that you get out before the golden handcuffs lock you in. If you're realizing that banking is a game of optics as much as it is output, you're not wrong. But what if you don't know what you're doing wrong? Watch this next video to learn how you can avoid the invisible landmines that can sabotage your career. Thanks for watching. See you next time.